Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vanessa Weisbrod from the Celiac Disease Program at Children's National Medical Center, and I want to welcome you to our Navigating the Holidays in Gluten-Free Style webcast. I want to make this a really interactive seminar, so please, if you have any questions along the way, go ahead and you can submit them in the chat box, you can submit them in the question box, or you can raise your hand and I can call on you and unmute you. To ask your question verbally. There are no silly questions, so anything is fair game. So let's go ahead and get started. So the goal today is to talk about having a safe and fun holiday season and making it as fulfilling and wonderful as the holidays were before receiving a diagnosis of celiac disease, whether it's for you or for your child or another family member, just trying to make the most out of these times when we're together and surrounded by food. That's our agenda, but we'll skip over that since we're going to get to it all in a moment. So the really big thing about going into the holidays when you're managing a gluten-free diet is to try and avoid any surprises. You want to always be planning ahead. You want to make sure that you know what you're walking into so that you or your child doesn't end up having a bad experience. And while it might seem a little bit of a demanding and planning effort up front, it will make for a much, much better holiday experience with friends or with family, however your family chooses to celebrate. So before we get to the holidays, whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah or other holidays that you celebrate in December, we want to do some investigating. So what kind of event are you going to? Is it a small family gathering where it would be really easy for you to find out what kind of food is going to be served? Or is it a huge holiday soiree that's part of a business party where it would be catered and there might be a lot more things that you need to find out before getting to the event? We're going to want to talk about how the food will be served. Are you sitting down and getting a plated meal? Is it a buffet? Are people bringing food from home? So these are all things to consider as we go into the holiday season. But the bottom line is just finding out where the food's coming from, how it's being prepared, and how it's getting to you, and how you will be able to identify whether or not it's safe for you or your child. So before we get into getting to the parties or going to Grandma and Grandpa's house or Aunt Susie's house, let's make some phone calls. So if you're going to go to a dinner at someone else's home, it would be wonderful if you could contact them in advance and ask what they're going to be serving and talk to them about gluten-free food preparation. You might find that they know a ton about gluten-free food, how to prevent cross-contamination, and that many of the things are going to be naturally gluten-free. You might also not. And if you find out that a lot of the things are not going to be safe for a gluten-free diet, it might be an option for you to suggest bringing something that would be safe for you to eat. So, for example, I just came back from Thanksgiving with my husband's family in Boston, and they are wonderful about the gluten-free diet. But there are certain things that they make in their normal way that is not safe for myself or my son to eat. So I always offer to make a gluten-free alternative. So this year I made a gluten-free stuffing and a gluten-free dessert that of course everybody could enjoy, but that I knew for sure no matter what, if there was a mistake made in the kitchen, that I could eat and my son could eat our stuffing and the dessert. And for my family, it's one thing, I'm more comfortable speaking up. But let's say that you were going to a friend's house and you might feel a little bit more uneasy. Even if they tell you, nope, don't bring a thing, I always still bring something with me, just as an in case there was something that went wrong. I've had many instances where people have tried to purchase gluten-free items for me, and they're really excited about it, and they have such a wonderful heart, and they've tried to do such a nice thing for me, but they run in and they show me the package and it says guilt-free instead of gluten-free. And that's just one example of how a marketing gimmick on a package could very, very easily be confusing to someone who's trying to purchase gluten-free foods. So regardless, I try to always bring something with me just in case to, one, show my appreciation for the host and having us, and then also just to have a backup for myself in case I can't eat any of the other food. If you're going to an event that's going to be catered, you'll want to reach out to the catering company. You'll want to find out what the menu is going to be, what ingredients they're going to use, and if there are items that are not gluten-free, are there any substitutions that can be made, or can they have something available for you that's put in a separate area that you would just ask for, so that you'd know that you could get food. Now, the thing about catering companies is that the people you speak to on the phone are not always the people who end up being at the event. So when you would get to the event, you would want to find the manager who's in charge of everybody and to find out where the gluten-free food is, and just to double check that it was actually gluten-free and that it's safe for you to eat. Also, lots of holiday parties have buffets, and while, it's not always the fun thing to do to run to the front of the line and be pushy, in this situation, it's actually a safety thing that spoons, as the line keeps going, there's lots of people trying to get food quickly, spoons get switched between different dishes, and there can be contamination. So it's always good if you can go first and get the items that are naturally gluten-free and make sure that those spoons have only been in those dishes. So now, inevitably, mistakes happen, and it's the holidays, and you don't want to end up having a bad night. So I want to just take a moment and encourage you to not only have a backup plan for food, but have an emotional backup plan. So it has happened. I've been gluten-free for 14 years, and there have been times when I've been somewhere where there was not one thing that I could eat. And I've been places with my 4-year-old where there were things that he couldn't eat. So what do? No matter what, I always have a backup plan. I always keep granola bars or cookies or trail mix or popcorn or something in my bag, just in case there is nothing that can be eaten, just so that you don't get, well, I like to say hangry, but so that you can still have a good time without getting upset. I also never go to a party starving, because then if there was a mistake made or I can't eat the food, I'm upset, because not only can I not eat, but then I'm really, really, really hungry and can't do anything about it. So I don't necessarily eat a full meal before I go, but I never go hungry. If you are comfortable, there's nothing wrong with asking if there's something special you could whip up, if you could, make a salad, or, find something that might be naturally gluten-free in the fridge. Oftentimes people keep hummus or cheese, things like that in the refrigerator that would be naturally gluten-free and okay to eat. And worst case scenario, you might leave the party a little bit early and get something on the way home or fix a meal when you get home. But, it's important to remember that these are the holidays, you're with family and friends and people who care, and that, sometimes despite people really trying to make an effort with gluten-free, that mistakes happen, and that it's better to stay safe than it is to get sick. So I just want to put in a reminder for reading food labels. Like I mentioned before with the guilt-free food instead of the gluten-free food, people might intend to do something really nice, but there might be a hidden ingredient. They might not have understood what the product was, and it might have said wheat-free, not gluten-free, and perhaps it is not safe. So, if you feel unsure or you're not confident that the products are safe, ask to see the food label. There's nothing wrong with that, just double checking to keep yourself safe. Remember that at the end of the day, you or your child are the one who will be sick. So if in doubt, always ask to see the label on the package. And when it comes to prepared food, there's no harm in asking how the food was prepared for the meal. This is not necessarily a holiday story, but our team traveled to India a few weeks ago for the International Celiac Disease Symposium, and they had told us that the biryani was naturally gluten-free because it was a rice dish. Well, what they didn't tell us is that the dish was covered in a pastry dough that had wheat in it and then steamed, and then the pastry dough was peeled back as a presentation for the dish, which now, because there was wheat in the dough and touching the rice, it was no longer a gluten-free dish. So it was completely mind-boggling when I saw this happen, that they had a gluten-free sign on this dish. So it was a really good reminder that even though the food itself might be naturally gluten-free, that there may have been a preparation method used that would make it unsafe. So, always double check if you are feeling uncomfortable about something. And, if you feel that there's a good chance the food contains gluten, it's okay not to eat it. In fact, you don't want to eat it. You just don't want to make yourself or your child sick. So let's talk about potlucks. Potlucks are a really popular thing to do around the holiday. Everyone brings a dish, everybody shares. It's a very familial way of doing things. So if you are going to be invited to a potluck, perhaps that when you're planning the menus, you could ask that all attendees provide a list of the ingredients or the allergens that's going to be included so that you would know beforehand what you could eat. I also, will sometimes say, hey, can we just make everything naturally gluten-free? It's not that difficult, and there are so many options on the market today that there are lots of ways to make it completely gluten-free. But of course, there are times when everything won't be. So one idea is to organize the table and put all of the gluten-free items in their separate area with separate utensils so that they won't get contaminated and shared with other items that would contain gluten. And again, if you have any questions, find the person who made the item and ask them how they prepared it and if it's safe for you to eat or your child to eat. For potlucks, I always like to recommend that if you or your child is on a gluten-free diet, that you volunteer to bring one of the main dishes. And that way, you know that there will be something filling and that you will like to eat and that will be safe for you or your child to eat. So when it comes to past hors d'oeuvres, this can often be a tough time, especially at holiday parties. A lot of past hors d'oeuvres are gluten-containing items, and it's because they're easy to bake and they're easy to serve in a finger food type of way. So if you're going to a party where there's going to be past foods, I would always recommend contacting the venue or the caterer ahead of time and ask if the gluten-free items can be set aside for you so that it's easy to identify what they are. Oftentimes when the servers come around the room, they are not sure, or there's a language barrier as to what is in the items. So it's always helpful to have a separate plate of gluten-free items that's set aside somewhere. Often these events happen to have a cheese tray or a table with charcuterie and that kind of stuff. Sliced cheeses are an excellent option at a holiday gathering, but you want to avoid it if they're touching crackers. The other thing to be cautious of is that if there are soft cheeses or spreadable cheeses, that if people are using knives to scoop up the cheese and spread it on the crackers, that cheese is now contaminated and has gluten in it, so it would no longer be safe. So you would want to avoid those. Shrimp cocktail is also another really popular option at cocktail receptions, and shrimp is naturally gluten-free, and most cocktail sauce is as well, but there are a handful that have malt vinegar in them, so you'll want to ask to see the label or just to double check that it's gluten-free. And again, have a snack in your purse just in case. Granola bars are skinny. You can easily keep one in your bag, for your child in a backpack, and just to never be hungry. So now I know that we're with Children's National Health System, and kids should not be consuming alcohol underage. But for mom and dad, celiac is genetic, and mom and dad might have it as well. So I just want to touch briefly on alcohol safety. There are so many options for safe alcohol. There are gluten-free beers now. There are ciders. Distilled alcohol is gluten-free. The distillation process strips the protein. The problem comes from items like gluten-containing beer and malted beverages. So with these items, there are often festive holiday drinks that will be on a specialty cocktail menu, and the servers will be mixing cocktails and shakers. If they use these same shakers for all the drinks without washing them in between, there can be cross-contamination, and it could potentially make a person with celiac disease sick. So when it comes to these things, evaluate the situation, identify what they're serving, make sure it's gluten-free, and if you're unable to find out, it's always safe to stick with wine, champagne, or other bottled beverages that are gluten-free, like a gluten-free beer. The spiked seltzers are gluten-free, and just make sure you're picking something that is not a malted beverage. So now let's talk about hosting the holidays at your house. So hosting at your home is a really wonderful way to engage your family in gluten-free food. So one idea is that if you're going to host the holidays this year, just decide that everything is going to be gluten-free for that day, and let your families taste how wonderful gluten-free food can be. Once they've tasted how awesome gluten-free can be, it's much easier in years forward to then ask when you go to their homes to have gluten-free options as well. But you know, people always like to share and join together as a community for food. So if family and friends are coming to your house and they want to bring food, you know, you could first ask if they could keep the items gluten-free. But sometimes there are friends and family who are not super supportive. So in these situations, decide how you're going to handle these things. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different process that we need to take to make sure that everyone stays safe. So one idea is to have a separate area where you'll set up the gluten-containing items. You'll want to have separate servingware for all of it, and before people start eating, you'll want to remind them how serious having celiac disease is and the need to keep things separate so that they remember when they're putting food on their plate that they don't put the same utensils in different dishes. And you know, I would really encourage you to try and have your family members try gluten-free food. There's this stigma still attached to gluten-free food tasting like cardboard, and you know, it's not true. There's lots of delicious gluten-free food out there, and actually at Thanksgiving, my husband's family, they all love the gluten-free stuffing and went back for seconds of my cobbler. No one would even know that it was gluten-free. So, you know, I would encourage you to encourage your family members to try the food, and as they learn that it tastes just the same, they will become more supportive if they aren't already. I also like to recommend that if you're cooking a holiday meal for the first time this year, that you test out all the recipes before the actual day of the event so that you know that it's going to taste great and that you'll be very confident as everyone tastes it at your home. So finding substitutions. I've talked about how gluten-free can taste great, so let's talk about how you can do that. So almost every holiday recipe I can think of has a substitution. Your stuffings, your pie crust, the breads, everything. There's an option now on the gluten-free marketplace. So let's talk about how to find it. And there are also tons of bakeries around the country that ship. So if there is a ready-made product or you don't feel like making it yourself, there are so many options to order online. So let's talk about pie crusts first. There are pre-made pie crusts, there are mixes for pie crust, or there are hundreds of recipes to make your own. Knicky Nick sells a frozen pre-made pie crust. Mydell makes a gluten-free graham cracker crust that's available in grocery stores nationwide and now is also available at Target. Then if you want to make a crust using a mix, King Arthur Flour, Williams-Sonoma, Bob's Red Mill, and Cup for Cup make a mix that you can add butter to and make your own crust. And there's even companies that make mincemeat filling for mincemeat pies. So there are lots and lots of options. If you're not into making your own pies, you can also buy a pre-made gluten-free pie. Again, Williams-Sonoma, Harry and David, and Wolferman's, they offer freshly baked gluten-free pies that are delivered right to your doorstep. Katz Gluten-Free has a line of pies that you can order from their website directly or through Amazon. And Goldbly is a site that offers freshly made pies that are from specialty bakers, and they ship nationwide. The sky is just the limit these days with options for the gluten-free diet. So, you know, never fear. There is a pumpkin pie out there. Whole Foods has a whole line of gluten-free pies now, and there's just so many options today. If there's something specific that you would like help finding, I am so happy to help you look for them. So when it comes to stuffing and gravy, there are also lots of mixes available. I always like to make a cornbread stuffing, so I'll buy either Pamela's Products or the Bob's Red Mill cornbread mix, and I will cook it, and then I'll chop it up to use as my stuffing. Williams-Sonoma has a variety of stuffing mixes, and they actually have a whole holiday dinner option that you can purchase. Aaliyah's Three Bakers in Namaste also have stuffing mixes. Whole Foods has a stuffing mix. It comes with the bread and the herbs, and you just add the fresh vegetables and chicken stock to them. And again, McCormick has a great gravy option that's available. But for gravy, my grandma is from Indiana, and I will never forget her showing me how to use the turkey drippings to make gravy. So if you've never made homemade gravy, try it out this year. It's delicious. And just use cornstarch for the thickener. So latkes and donuts, for the Jewish holidays, latkes and donuts are very popular. So Williams-Sonoma has their own line of gluten-free latkes. Straits has a latke mix that you can buy in supermarkets and is now also available for a discount in Walmart. And there are just lots of gluten-free vendors online now where you can order pre-made latkes and donuts. Or, of course, you can make your own. Just shred up some potatoes. You can use the starch that's in the potatoes to thicken them. You don't even need flour or matzo meal in them. And then Katz offers all different types of cookies and donuts and sweets. You can order them online, and they're also available in most grocery stores today. But their donuts are very, very popular with kids. And then with cookies. So it's hard to go through the holidays without cookies, and there is no shortage of gluten-free options available. There is a Christmas cookie book that I have the picture of up here by Ellen Brown. They have great recipes for cookies. But again, there are mixes from Pamela's, Cherry Brook Kitchen, Betty Crocker, and Immaculate Baking. Some of them are mixes, and some of them are slice and bake to make it really easy. And then Gluten-Free Jules also makes a gingerbread cookie mix. I would also encourage you to check out the Red Bandana Bakery. They're actually having a gluten-free gingerbread house making event this coming Saturday. It's a really fun event. It's part of our peer mentorship group, and they'll come together and make gluten-free gingerbread houses. And it's a 100% dedicated gluten-free bakery. And you can order a lot of your holiday baked goods from them as well. So now, traveling during the holidays, this can also be a challenging experience when you're having to think about every bite of food that goes into your mouth. So I want to stress the planning in advance about speaking with whomever you're staying with before you get there. So for this past week where we stayed with my in-laws, about a week before I called my mother-in-law and I gave her a list of all of my son's favorite things. So the kind of milk he likes, the type of blueberry muffins, the waffles, the things that would make him really happy staying with them and, you know, not disrupting his eating too much. And she was able to get all those things, and when his cousins were there who were not gluten-free, my son was really happy because he had the things that he likes to eat and we knew were safe. So even though his cousins were eating different things, he was okay because he felt confident in the food he was eating. So these are just a few ideas for traveling prep. So these cutting mats are just, they're like plastic silicone cutting mats, and I will often take them with me if we're staying in a rental house or going to a home where I'm unsure of their kitchen setup, because I know this is a safe surface that I can clean in the sink and use to prepare my kids' foods on. They also sell toaster bags to prevent cross-contamination when cooking. These are just bags that are toaster safe, and you can put your food in before putting it in the toaster. If there's a lot of gluten-containing ingredients, you might want to think about bringing a sponge or a cloth for washing things. Another option for this is just paper towels, a much easier thing. A lot of people do like these Swedish dishcloths. They're really lightweight and they dry very quickly. So if you didn't want to have the waste of using paper towels, you could look into those. But I typically just use a paper towel. So snacks and food. So if either the host would be able to get some snacks or bring your own, I always keep these mac and cheese cups in my suitcase when we travel. You just add boiling water to them. It's like a ramen noodle cup, but with mac and cheese. And even on an airplane, these are really wonderful. You just add the hot water and let it sit for a few moments, and it's delicious, and my kids absolutely love them. I also like them because they're single serving, so that if my son doesn't finish it, I don't feel so bad about wasting, you know, a whole box of mac and cheese. It's just a very small one-portion serving. And then when I get to wherever I'm going, I always like to find a place to keep my gluten-free items just so that I know where they are and there aren't people taking them or contaminating them. So I'll use like a reusable shopping bag, and I'll just stake out my own little section of the counter. So again, if you're staying with relatives or with friends for the holidays, there's most likely going to be more than one meal. So even though you're probably focused on the big celebration, what about breakfast and lunch the other days that you're going to be there? So again, I like to always encourage talking through the entire time you're going to be with or outside of your home and staying somewhere else, so that you can really make the necessary arrangements in advance and feel confident when you get there. This whole planning ahead has really helped me be calm when I'm traveling. Traveling with kids is stressful regardless of having a special diet, so adding it in can make it very stressful. So just having a plan in advance will make you feel more at ease and more calm and have a plan once you get there. And I just want to remind you that while you are managing a special diet, that don't forget to enjoy the holidays with your friends and family. You know, remember to be careful, but please don't forget to have fun. And I hope that with just some simple planning that you will have a wonderful holiday season. So at this point,